The auction block stood in the center of the barn like a crude altar to something that should have died years ago. Dust hung thick in the shafts of light cutting through the broken roof. The air smelled of old hay, sweat, and something darker, fear baked into wood grain. Men stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls, hats pulled low, faces half hidden. Some came to buy, others came to watch. A few came because they didn't know how to stop coming. Cole Brennan stood near the back, his daughter's hand in his. Sarah was 8. She wore a blue gingham dress her mother had sewn before the fever took her 2 winters past. Her hair was braided tight, blonde like her mother's, and her eyes, wide and curious, took in everything with the kind of innocence that made Cole's chest ache. "Daddy, what are they selling?" she whispered. Cole didn't answer right away. His jaw worked, teeth grinding against words he didn't want to say. "Livestock," he finally muttered. "Just livestock, sweetheart." But Sarah wasn't stupid. She could see the platform. She could see the iron rings bolted into the wood. She could see the man in the black coat standing beside it, grinning like a preacher at a revival. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the barn. "Next item, gentlemen, young, strong, good hands for fieldwork, stable work, whatever work you need done." 2 men dragged a boy onto the platform. He couldn't have been more than 12. His wrists were bound in front of him with frayed rope, the kind that left burns if you struggled. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, hanging loose over a frame that was too thin, ribs visible beneath sun-darkened skin. His feet were bare, caked in mud and dust. His hair, dark, almost black, fell into his eyes, but he didn't bother pushing it away. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the floor. "Don't look there," the boy whispered, not to anyone in particular, not a plea for help, just a quiet, desperate prayer to be invisible. But Cole looked, and his world stopped. The boy's face, the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he stood, hunched but not broken, still holding something inside that hadn't been sold yet. Cole knew that face. He knew it because he'd seen it in the mirror 20 years ago. He knew it because he'd seen it in his brother's eyes the day they buried their father. He knew it because that boy, standing on the auction block with his wrists bound and his bare feet filthy, was his nephew. Thomas, his brother Jacob's son. The auctioneer slapped the boy on the back, and Thomas flinched but didn't cry out. "Look at him, gentlemen, quiet, obedient, won't give you trouble, been through 3 owners already so he knows the drill. Starting bid, $20. Sarah tugged on Cole's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "can we buy that boy?" Cole's breath caught in his throat. "Sarah." He looked sad. "Maybe he needs a family. Maybe we could." "Sarah, stop." His voice came out harder than he meant. Sarah's face fell, and she shrank back, her fingers slipping from his hand. Cole's heart was hammering, his vision tunneled. All he could see was Thomas, 12 years old, standing where no child should ever stand. Jacob. His brother, dead 4 years now, killed in a skirmish 2 months after Appomattox in some godforsaken valley nobody remembered the name of, killed for nothing, for land that didn't matter anymore, for a war that was already over. Jacob's wife, Anna, had died in childbirth. Thomas had been 6 then. Cole had tried to take him in, but Jacob refused, proud, stubborn, said he'd raise his boy himself, that they didn't need charity. And then Jacob died. And Thomas disappeared. Cole had searched. For months, he'd ridden through burnt-out towns and refugee camps, asking questions, following rumors. But the war had scattered people like seeds in a windstorm. Families were torn apart. Children vanished. Records didn't exist. Eventually, Cole stopped searching. He told himself Thomas was dead. It was easier that way, cleaner. But Thomas wasn't dead. He was standing on an auction block, bound and barefoot, being sold like a mule. $20, a voice called from the crowd. $25, another said. The auctioneer grinned. Now we are talking, gentlemen, do I hear 30? Cole's hands curled into fists. Sarah was staring up at him, her eyes wide and worried. "Daddy, you're shaking." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." $30, someone shouted. Thomas didn't react. He just stood there, staring at the floor, his lips moving in some silent mantra Cole couldn't hear. "Don't look there, don't look there, don't look there." Cole took a step forward. Then another. The crowd shifted around him, men glancing his way with irritation. Sarah followed close behind, her small hand clutching the back of his coat. 35, a man near the front called. He was broad-shouldered, thick-necked, the kind of man who bought people because he could. The auctioneer pointed at him. 30F. "I've to the gentleman in the brown hat. Do I hear 40? Cole's voice cut through the barn like a blade. 50. The room went quiet. Every head turned. The auctioneer squinted at Cole, sizing him up. Then his grin widened. "Well now, $50 from the man in the back. Serious money, gentlemen, do I hear 55? The man in the brown hat glared at Cole, then spat into the dirt. 60. 70, Cole said. No hesitation, no thought. Sarah's hand tightened on his coat. "Daddy." "Stay close to me, Sarah." The man in the brown hat turned fully now, his face red. "You got some nerve, friend." 80, Cole said louder. The auctioneer laughed, delighted. $80, now that's a bidding war. Do I hear 90? The man in the brown hat stared at Cole for a long moment. Then he shook his head and stepped back, muttering something under his breath. The auctioneer waited, scanning the crowd. $80 going once, going twice. He slammed his hand on the platform. "Sold to the man in the back." Cole's legs felt like they might give out. Sarah looked up at him, confused. "Daddy, what did you just do?" Cole didn't answer. He was still staring at Thomas. And for the first time since being dragged onto the platform, Thomas looked up. Their eyes met. Thomas's face went pale. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Cole saw the recognition, the shock, the disbelief. And then something else. Something that looked like anger. The transaction happened fast. Cole handed over the money, every dollar he'd saved from 3 months of ranch work, and the auctioneer scribbled something on a scrap of paper that was supposed to pass for a bill of sale. "Pleasure doing business," the man said, tipping his hat. Cole didn't respond. He folded the paper and shoved it into his coat pocket, then turned toward the platform where 2 men were untying Thomas's wrists. The boy stumbled as they released him, catching himself on the edge of the platform. His hands were raw, red lines carved into his skin from the rope. He rubbed them absently, his eyes fixed on the ground. Cole approached slowly, Sarah still clinging to his coat. "Thomas," Cole said quietly. The boy flinched at the sound of his name. He didn't look up. "Thomas," Cole said again. "It's me. It's your uncle, Cole." Thomas's jaw tightened. His hands stopped moving. "I know who you are," he said. His voice was rough, older than it should have been. It carried weight that no 12-year-old should carry. Cole exhaled slowly. "Come on, let's get out of here." "Why?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cole frowned. "What do you mean, why?" Thomas finally looked up. His eyes were dark, hollow, but there was fire behind them, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Why now?" Thomas said. "Why here?" Cole opened his mouth, but no words came. Sarah tugged on his coat. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart, just give me a minute." But Thomas wasn't done. "You didn't come for me," he said, his voice trembling. "When Pa died, when they took me, you didn't come." "Thomas, I tried." "You didn't try hard enough." The words hit Cole like a fist to the chest. He wanted to argue, to explain, to tell Thomas about the months he'd spent searching, the dead ends, the false leads. But what good would it do? Thomas had spent 4 years believing he'd been abandoned. 4 years being passed from one owner to another like a piece of property. Words wouldn't fix that. You're right, Cole said quietly. Thomas blinked, surprised. I should have found you, Cole continued. I should have torn this whole territory apart until I did. I didn't, and I'm sorry. Silence. Thomas's hands curled into fists, then slowly uncurled. Sorry doesn't change anything, he muttered. No, Cole said, it doesn't. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Thomas could hear. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving you again. Thomas looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, truth, maybe, or proof that this wasn't just another lie. Finally, he looked away. Fine, he said, let's go. They walked out of the barn into the late afternoon sun. The town, if you could call it that, was little more than a crossroads with a few buildings scattered along a dirt road. The kind of place that only existed because people needed somewhere to do business they didn't want witnessed in daylight. Cole's horse was tied to a post near the edge of the property. Sarah climbed up first, and Cole lifted Thomas onto the saddle behind her. Thomas didn't say anything. He just gripped the saddle horn and stared straight ahead. Cole swung up behind them and nudged the horse into a walk. They rode in silence for the first mile. Then Sarah turned in the saddle, looking back at Thomas with wide, curious eyes. What's your name? She asked. Thomas didn't answer. His name's Thomas, Cole said gently. He's your cousin. Sarah's face lit up. Really? Thomas glanced at her, then away. Really? Cole said. I didn't know I had a cousin, Sarah said. Why didn't you tell me, Daddy? Cole's throat tightened. It's complicated, sweetheart. Everything's complicated with grown-ups, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Then she turned back to Thomas. Do you like horses? Thomas blinked. What? Horses, do you like them? He hesitated. I guess. I love horses, Sarah said. Daddy says maybe I can have my own when I'm older. Do you have a horse? No. Well, maybe you can share mine when I get one. Thomas didn't respond, but something in his expression softened just a fraction. Cole felt a flicker of hope. They reached the ranch just before dusk. It wasn't much, a small cabin, a barn, a few acres of grazing land, but it was home. Cole had built it himself after the war, using every skill his father had taught him. It was quiet, peaceful, far enough from town that the ghosts didn't follow. He helped Sarah down first, then Thomas. Thomas stood in the yard, looking around with wary eyes. Come on, Cole said, let's get you cleaned up. Inside, Cole heated water on the stove while Sarah sat at the table, swinging her legs and chattering about nothing in particular. Thomas stood near the door, arms crossed, looking like he might bolt at any second. Cole poured the warm water into a basin and set it on the table along with a clean cloth. Sit, he said. Thomas didn't move. Thomas, sit. Slowly, reluctantly, Thomas sat. Cole knelt in front of him and took one of his hands, turning it palm up. The rope burns were deep, angry red lines that would scar. This is going to sting, Cole said. He dipped the cloth in the water and began cleaning the wounds. Thomas hissed through his teeth, but didn't pull away. Sarah watched from across the table, her chin resting on her hands. Does it hurt? She asked. Yeah, Thomas said quietly. Daddy's good at fixing things, Sarah said. He fixed my doll when her arm came off, and he fixed the fence when the wind knocked it down. He'll fix you too. Thomas looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. I'm not broken, he said. I didn't say you were, Sarah replied simply. Cole finished wrapping Thomas's hands in clean strips of cloth, then stood. You'll sleep in the loft, he said. There's blankets up there. Sarah, show him. Sarah hopped down from her chair and grabbed Thomas's hand, pulling him toward the ladder. Thomas followed, slow and uncertain, like a dog that had been kicked too many times. Cole watched them go, his chest tight. I should have found you. The words echoed in his mind. He turned back to the basin of bloodied water and stared at it for a long time. 3 days passed. Thomas didn't say much. He worked, though hard, without being asked. He mucked stalls, hauled water, mended fence posts that had been leaning since last winter. He moved like someone who'd learned that silence kept you safe and stillness kept you invisible. Sarah followed him everywhere. She talked enough for both of them, a constant stream of observations and questions that Thomas mostly ignored. But sometimes, just sometimes, Cole caught the ghost of a smile on the boy's face when Sarah said something particularly ridiculous. It was something, small but something. On the 4th morning, Cole was splitting wood behind the barn when he heard hoofbeats. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked toward the road. 3 riders. They came slow, deliberate, kicking up dust as they approached. The man in front was broad-shouldered, gray-haired, wearing a duster that had seen better days. A silver star was pinned to his chest. Sheriff Karn. Cole's stomach dropped. He set the axe down and walked toward the house, keeping his movements calm, measured. The riders stopped in the yard. Sheriff Karn dismounted first, his boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. The 2 men with him stayed on their horses, hired hands by the look of them. Young, mean-eyed, hands resting a little too casually on their holsters. Cole Brennan, Karn said, his voice gravel-rough. Sheriff, Cole replied evenly. Karn looked around the property, taking his time. His gaze lingered on the barn, then the cabin, then settled back on Cole. Heard you made a purchase a few days back, Karn said. Cole's jaw tightened. That's right. Boy about 12 years old, dark hair, thin. What about it? Karn smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There's been a complaint. From who? Man named Terrence Good. Says the boy you bought was stolen property. Cole's hands curled into fists. Stolen property. That's right. The boy's got a name, Cole said quietly. It's Thomas, and he's not property. Karn shrugged. Law says otherwise. Even 4 years after the war, things like that auction you attended, they're still legal in certain circumstances. Debt repayment, indenture, guardianship transfer. Good says the boy was under his guardianship, says you interfered with a legal transaction. That's a lie. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I'm here to collect him. No. The word came out flat, final. Karn's smile faded. Excuse me. I said no. One of the hired hands shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his gun. Karn held up a hand, stopping him. Now, Cole, Karn said slowly, I don't want trouble, I'm just doing my job. Your job is to protect people, Cole said, not drag children back to men who treat them like animals. Karn's expression hardened. You don't get to decide that. I just did. For a moment, neither man moved. Then the door to the cabin creaked open. Thomas stepped out onto the porch, Sarah right behind him. Daddy, Sarah's voice was small, scared. Get back inside, Cole said, not taking his eyes off Karn. But Thomas didn't move. He stood on the porch, staring at the sheriff with an expression Cole couldn't quite read. Fear, yes, but something else too, recognition. Karn saw it too. There he is, Karn said. Come on down, boy, time to go. Thomas didn't move. Thomas, Karn said again, his voice harder. Now. He's not going anywhere, Cole said. Karn's hand dropped to his belt, resting on the handle of his revolver. Cole, I'm giving you one more chance. Hand over the boy, and we'll forget this ever happened. And if I don't? Karn's smile returned, cold and sharp. Then we'll take him, and you'll be charged with obstruction, maybe worse. One of the hired hands drew his gun, holding it loose at his side. Sarah whimpered. Cole took a step forward, putting himself between the riders and the cabin. You really want to do this, Karn? Cole said quietly. You really want to draw on an unarmed man in front of his daughter. Karn's jaw worked. The silence stretched, tight as a bowstring. Then, from somewhere down the road, more hoofbeats. Everyone turned. 4 riders crested the hill, older men, weathered and lean, dressed in work clothes. Cole recognized them immediately. Frank Dobbs, Isaac Mercer, Old Will Hargrove, and Samuel Cortez. Ranch hands from the valley, men Cole had worked beside for years, men who'd heard the commotion and decided to see what was happening. They rode into the yard and dismounted, spreading out in a loose line behind Cole. Frank Dobbs, grey-bearded and steady, stepped forward. "Problem here, Sheriff?" Frank asked. Karn's eyes flicked from Cole to the newcomers, calculating. "This is official business," Karn said. "Doesn't look official," Frank said. "Looks like 3 armed men threatening a family." "We're not threatening anyone," Karn said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Then put the guns away," Isaac said. Karn stared at them for a long moment. Then he looked back at Cole. "This isn't over," Karn said. "Yes," Cole said quietly, "it is." Karn's jaw tightened. He jerked his head toward his men, and they holstered their guns. "You're making a mistake, Brennan," Karn said. "Maybe," Cole replied, "but it's mine to make." Karn mounted his horse, his movements stiff with barely contained anger. "We'll be back," he said. Then he turned and rode off, his men following. Cole watched them go until they disappeared over the hill. Then he turned to Frank and the others. "Thank you," he said. Frank nodded. "We look after our own, Cole, you know that." "I owe you." "No," Frank said, "you don't." He tipped his hat, and the 4 men mounted up and rode off. Cole stood in the yard for a long time, his heart still hammering. Then he turned back to the cabin. Thomas was still standing on the porch, pale and shaking. "It's okay," Cole said. "They're gone." Thomas didn't respond. He just turned and walked back inside. Sarah ran to Cole, throwing her arms around his waist. "Daddy, I was scared," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart," Cole said, holding her tight. "Me too." That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Cole sat on the porch with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. The sky was clear, stars scattered thick across the black. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. The door creaked behind him. Thomas stepped out, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. He stood there for a moment, uncertain, then sat down on the edge of the porch, a few feet away from Cole. They sat in silence. Cole didn't push. He'd learned that with Thomas, silence was safer than words. After a long time, Thomas spoke. "That sheriff," he said quietly, "he's the one who took me." Cole's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Thomas pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "After Pa died, I didn't have anywhere to go. A woman in town took me in for a while, but she couldn't keep me, said she didn't have the money. Karn showed up one day and said he knew someone who'd take me, said it was legal, that I'd be taken care of." Cole's hands clenched around the cup. "He sold you," Cole said. Thomas nodded. "First time to a man who ran a freight company. I worked loading wagons, then he sold me to a farmer, then to Good." "Did they?" Cole's voice cracked. "Did they hurt you?" "Though." Mast didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Not all of them." Cole closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "God, Thomas, I'm so sorry." "You keep saying that," Thomas said, "but it doesn't change what happened." "I know." Thomas looked at him then, his face half-shadowed in the dim light from the cabin window. "Why didn't you come?" he asked. "Why didn't you find me?" Cole set the cup down, his hands trembling. "I tried," he said. "After Jacob died, I went looking for you. I asked everyone. I rode to every town, every camp. But the war had scattered everyone. People didn't keep records. Families were just gone." He paused, his throat tight. Eventually, I stopped, Cole said. I told myself you were dead. It was easier than thinking you were out there somewhere alone and I couldn't find you. Thomas stared at the ground. I wasn't dead, he said. I know. I was right here, in this territory, the whole time. I know. Thomas's voice shook. I thought you didn't care. I thought you forgot about me. I didn't forget, Cole said. Not for one day. Thomas wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, angry at the tears. Then why'd you stop looking? Cole exhaled slowly, because I was a coward. The words hung in the air. Thomas looked at him, surprised. I was scared, Cole continued. Scared of what I'd find, scared that I'd failed you, so I stopped, and I hate myself for it. Thomas didn't respond. They sat in silence again, the night pressing in around them. Then Thomas said, Do you think Pa would have stopped? Cole thought about his brother, stubborn, fierce, impossibly loyal. No, Cole said, he wouldn't have. Thomas nodded, like that confirmed something he'd already known. He was a good man, Thomas said quietly. He was, Cole agreed, better than me. Maybe, Thomas said, then after a pause, but you came to that barn, you spent every dollar you had, and you stood up to the sheriff. Cole looked at him. Pa would have done that too, Thomas said. Maybe you're not so different. Cole's throat burned. He wanted to say something, thank you maybe, or I'll do better, or I won't let you down again. But the words felt too small. Instead, he reached out and put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Thomas tensed, then slowly relaxed. They sat like that for a long time, under the stars, the silence between them no longer empty, but full of something unspoken. Something like forgiveness, or maybe just the beginning of it. If you're still with me, take a breath. Pour yourself something warm and think about this. If you'd been Cole, standing in that barn, would you have had the courage to step forward? Would you have been able to face the boy you failed to save 4 years earlier? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you want to see how this story ends, if Thomas and Cole can truly rebuild what was broken, tap subscribe so you don't miss it. The next morning, Sarah woke Thomas before dawn. Come on, she said, tugging on his blanket. Daddy says we're going to fix the fence on the south pasture. He says you can help. Thomas groaned and rolled over. It's still dark. That's when the work starts, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Come on, I'll make you breakfast. Thomas sat up, rubbing his eyes. Downstairs, Cole was already dressed, pouring coffee into a tin cup. Morning, he said when Thomas appeared. Morning, Thomas muttered. Cole handed him a plate, eggs, bread, a slice of salt pork. Thomas ate slowly, watching Cole with cautious eyes. After breakfast, the three of them walked out to the south pasture, tools in hand. The fence was in rough shape, posts leaning, wire sagging. It would take most of the day to fix. Cole showed Thomas how to dig out the old posts and set new ones, how to stretch the wire tight and secure it properly. They worked side by side, mostly in silence. Sarah sat on a nearby rock, braiding grass and singing nonsense songs. At one point, Cole glanced over and saw Thomas smiling, just a little barely there, at something Sarah had said. It was the first real smile Cole had seen from him. You're good at this, Cole said. Thomas looked up, surprised. At what? Working, you've got steady hands, good instincts. Thomas shrugged. I've had practice. Still, Cole said, not everyone learns it. You did. Thomas didn't respond, but his shoulders straightened just a bit. By late afternoon, the fence was finished. Cole stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow, and nodded. Good work, he said. Thomas looked at the fence, then at Cole. Thanks, he said quietly. And for the first time, Cole thought maybe, just maybe, things might be okay. 2 weeks later, Karn came back. Cole was in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, the sound of men who weren't in a hurry because they didn't think they needed to be. He stepped out into the yard, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. Karn, two hired guns, and someone else. A thin man in a dusty suit, pale-faced and sharp-eyed Terence Good. Cole's jaw tightened. Thomas and Sarah were by the creek skipping stones. Cole whistled sharply, and they both looked up. Inside, Cole called, "Now." Sarah's face went pale. She grabbed Thomas's hand and ran for the cabin. Karn dismounted, Good beside him. "Brennan," Karn said. "Karn," Cole replied. "This is Mr. Good," Karn said. "I believe you've met." Good stepped forward, his expression smug. "That boy you're harboring is my property, Mr. Brennan. I have the papers to prove it." He pulled a folded document from his coat and held it up. Cole didn't look at it. "He's not property," Cole said. "He's a child." "He's a ward under legal guardianship," Good said. "Transferred to me by the county after his father's death. You had no right to take him. You had no right to sell him." Good's smile didn't waver. "I didn't sell him. I transferred his indenture, perfectly legal." "Legal," Cole said quietly. "That's the word men like you hide behind when you do something evil." Good's smile faltered. Karn stepped in. "Cole, we're not here to debate morality. We are here to enforce the law. Now hand over the boy or I'll arrest you." Cole didn't move. "No." Karn's hand dropped to his gun. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll have to shoot me first." The hired guns drew their weapons. And then, from down the road, more hoofbeats. Cole's heart lifted. Frank Dobbs, Isaac Mercer, Will Hargrove, Samuel Cortez. And behind them, a dozen more men, ranch hands, farmers, townspeople, people Cole had worked with, traded with, lived beside for years. They rode into the yard and formed a line between Cole and the sheriff's men. Frank stepped forward, his shotgun resting casually across his saddle. "Sheriff," Frank said, "you're outnumbered." Karn's face went red. "This is obstruction." "This is community," Frank said. "We're not letting you take that boy. He's not yours to protect." "He's ours now," Isaac said. "Far as we're concerned, Cole's his kin, and we don't let kin get dragged off by men who profit off misery." Good sputtered, "This is illegal." "So selling children," Will said flatly. Karn looked around, calculating. His hired guns shifted uneasily, outnumbered 3-1. Finally, Karn holstered his gun. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Frank said, "it is." Karn stared at Cole for a long moment, then spat into the dirt. "Let's go," he muttered. He mounted his horse, and the others followed. Good glared at Cole. "You haven't heard the last of this." "I think I have," Cole said. Good climbed onto his horse, and the group rode off, kicking up dust as they disappeared down the road. The ranch hands stayed until they were gone. Then Frank turned to Cole. "You good?" he asked. Cole nodded, his throat tight. "I'm good, thanks." Frank smiled. "Don't mention it." He tipped his hat, and the others followed suit, riding off one by one until only Cole remained. Cole stood in the yard, the sun warm on his face, and exhaled slowly. Then he turned toward the cabin. Thomas was standing on the porch, Sarah beside him. "They're gone," Cole said. Thomas's shoulders sagged with relief. Sarah ran down the steps and threw her arms around Cole. "I knew you'd keep us safe," she said. Cole hugged her, then looked up at Thomas. "You okay?" he asked. Thomas nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm okay." Cole climbed the steps and stopped in front of him. "I need you to understand something," Cole said. "You're not a ward, you're not property, you're family, and as long as I'm breathing, no one's taking you anywhere." Thomas's eyes glistened. "You mean that?" he asked. "I mean it." Thomas looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," he said quietly, "okay." Days turned into weeks. Thomas stayed. He worked the ranch alongside Cole, learning the rhythms of the land, the care of animals, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. Sarah continued to follow him everywhere, and Thomas, slowly, hesitantly, began to let her in. One evening, Cole found them sitting on the porch steps, Thomas teaching Sarah how to whittle with a pocket knife. "Not too deep," Thomas was saying, "just light strokes, see." Sarah's tongue stuck out in concentration as she carefully carved a piece of wood. "Like this?" she asked. "Perfect," Thomas said. Cole stood in the doorway, watching, his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or hope. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Thomas came downstairs. Cole was sitting at the table, mending a bridle. "Can I ask you something?" Thomas said. "Anything." Thomas sat down across from him. "Why'd you do it? At the auction, you didn't know it was me when you started bidding." Cole set the bridle down. "No," he said, "I didn't." "Then why?" Cole thought for a moment. "Because no one should be on that block," he said finally, "and because I saw you, really saw you, and I couldn't walk away." Thomas nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. Cole's throat tightened. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," Thomas said, "because you didn't have to, but you did anyway." They sat in silence for a while, the lantern flickering between them. Then Thomas stood. "Good night, Uncle Cole," he said. It was the first time he'd called him that. Cole's vision blurred. "Good night, Thomas," he said. Epilogue. Years later, people would talk about the day the sheriff tried to take Cole Brennan's nephew. They'd talk about how the community stood together, how they refused to let cruelty win. But what they didn't talk about, what they couldn't see, was the quiet healing that happened afterward. The way Thomas slowly learned to trust again. The way Sarah became the sister Thomas never had. The way Cole learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but building something better in its place. Thomas grew. He became strong, steady, kind. He stayed on the ranch, eventually taking over when Cole's hands got too stiff for the work. Sarah grew too, fierce and bright, a teacher in the Valley School. And Cole. He lived long enough to see Thomas marry, to hold his first grandchild, a boy with dark hair and steady eyes. "What are you going to name him?" Cole asked, his voice rough with age. Thomas looked down at the baby, then at Cole. "Jacob," he said, "after my father." Cole's eyes filled. "He'd be proud of you," Cole said. "I hope so," Thomas said, then he paused. "But I learned how to be a father from you." Cole couldn't speak. He just reached out and squeezed Thomas's shoulder, the way he had all those years ago on the porch under the stars. And in that moment, Cole knew, despite everything he'd done wrong, despite all the ways he'd failed, he'd done one thing right. He'd brought Thomas home. The sun dipped low over the valley, casting long shadows across the land. Dust rose around their feet as they stood together, 3 generations, bound not by law or paper, but by something stronger. By choice. By love. By the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the past define them. And in the distance, the wind carried the sound of a child's laughter, bright and free and full of hope.